Before everyone, he promised coldly, "I will never touch you." But one look from the bride was enough for the arrogant millionaire to lose control, and what followed silenced the entire hall. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. Every day we post videos like this continuing. The hall was immaculate. Arrangements of rare orchids adorned each table, while waiters in impeccable attire served fine vintage French champagne. The guests, ministers, entrepreneurs, and celebrities chatted animatedly, admiring the perfection of the event at the luxurious hotel on the shores of Brighton Beach. It was without a doubt the most talked-about wedding of the year in London, not for the love involved, but for the economic empire that was consolidating there. Laura Miller, daughter of the renowned artist Anthony Miller, adjusted her veil for the last time before entering. Her hands trembled. It wasn't the usual nervousness of brides. It was the weight of the decision that suffocated her from within. She observed herself in the mirror, the haute couture dress, the jewels, the perfect makeup. All of it seemed to belong to someone else, not to the simple young woman who had grown up in studios, smelling of paint and with hands stained with watercolor. "You look beautiful, my daughter," Anthony said, entering the private room. His face, once vibrant, now bore deep marks of the illness that consumed him. Cancer had taken not only his vitality, but also his financial stability. The expensive treatments had drained all of the family's resources. "Father, we can still back out," Laura whispered, holding the trembling hands of the man who, even debilitated, remained her safe harbor. "And lose everything, including the treatment?" Anthony lowered his eyes. "Raphael Kingston is a difficult man, but honorable. He fulfilled his part of the agreement. Now we have to fulfill ours." Laura swallowed hard. Raphael Kingston, heir to the Kingston Group, one of the largest business conglomerates in the United Kingdom, was not a man. He was a fortress. Cold, calculating, and, according to rumors, incapable of love after his ex-fiancée abandoned him for another man, taking with her a considerable part of the family fortune. Since then, Raphael had transformed into a money-making machine, recovering everything he had lost and multiplying the family's assets. But he had also become known for his emotional coldness and arrogance. The wedding march began to play. It was time. Laura took a deep breath and, arm in arm with her father, walked down the aisle. The camera flashes blinded her, but not as much as Raphael's gaze, who awaited her at the altar with an impassive expression. Tall, athletic, and with strong features, he looked more like a marble statue than a groom. The vows were mechanical, the words of love rehearsed, the exchange of rings, an empty ritual. When the priest announced that the groom could kiss the bride, Raphael leaned in and whispered in her ear, "Don't delude yourself, this is just a contract, I will never touch you." The words hit Laura like a slap, but instead of shrinking, something awoke within her. In an unexpected impulse, she held Raphael's face and kissed him. It was not a kiss of desire, but of defiance. She wanted to show him that she would not just be a doll in his collection of conquests. The reception proceeded like a well-rehearsed spectacle, false smiles, eloquent toasts, formal dances. Laura felt watched the entire time, not only by curious guests, but mainly by Raphael's family. His mother, Eliza Kingston, a socialite from a traditional lineage, made no secret of her displeasure with her daughter-in-law. For her, the daughter of a bankrupt artist was not worthy of carrying the Kingston surname. "Welcome to the family," Eliza said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you know how to honor the name you now carry." "Thank you, Mrs. Kingston. I will do my best not to disappoint you," Laura replied, maintaining her composure, even as she felt diminished by her mother-in-law's gaze. When the party ended, the couple headed to the Kingston mansion in Hampstead Heath. The silence in the car was cutting. Raphael kept his eyes fixed on the road, while Laura admired the city lights, trying to absorb her new reality. The mansion was imposing, with modern architecture and a privileged view of Richmond Park. A small army of staff greeted them, all formally trained to serve London's most influential family. Laura was led by a serious housekeeper to the room she would occupy, separated from Raphael's room by an entire corridor. The message was clear. This marriage would be an elaborate farce. As she unpacked, Laura looked at the few personal belongings she had brought. Her painting supplies, some books, photographs of her father. Everything seemed out of place in that environment of cold luxury. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "We need to talk," Raphael said, entering without waiting for an invitation. He wore casual clothes now, but his posture remained rigid. "I want to make some rules clear." "Me too," Laura retorted, standing up. She was tired of feeling diminished. Raphael raised an eyebrow, surprised by her direct response. "You can maintain appearances socially, attend necessary events, and use my surname. In return, your father will receive the treatment he needs, and you won't lose your house. But we are not a real couple, we never will be. Why marry then? You could have simply made a donation or a loan." "Because I need a wife to assume the international presidency of the group. My father stipulated this in his will. Only a family man can hold the position, and unlike the women in my social circle, you are not interested in my fortune, only in your father's survival. It's a pragmatic agreement." Laura felt her blood boil. "And what makes you think I would agree to be treated like a decorative object?" "The fact that you are here," he replied coldly. "But don't worry. You'll have the freedom to do whatever you want, as long as you're discreet. Just avoid scandals and maintain appearances." "I'm not like your ex-fiancé, Raphael," Laura said, realizing she was touching an open wound. "I didn't marry for your millions. I married to save my father's life. And since we're setting rules, I also have mine. I will not be treated like a commodity. I am legally your wife, and I demand a minimum of respect." Raphael's face hardened. "You know nothing about me or my past. Neither do you about me, but one thing I guarantee. The only thing I will take from this marriage is my dignity. I don't want your money. I don't want your empire. I just want my father to live." Something in Laura's tone seemed to penetrate Raphael's armor. Perhaps the raw honesty, perhaps the absence of material interest. For a brief moment, his gaze softened, revealing a man behind the mask of the ruthless businessman. But soon, the emotional wall rose again. "Good night, Laura. Tomorrow we have a lunch with investors. Be ready by 11 a.m. Days turned into weeks. Laura adapted to the new routine. She accompanied Raphael to social events, smiled for the cameras, played the perfect wife. When they were alone, however, they barely spoke. He spent hours in the office. She visited her father at the private hospital where he now received the best treatment available. With each passing day, Laura felt more lonely. The mansion, despite its luxury, was a cold place, where the staff treated her with distant deference. The only exception was Mrs. Davis, the oldest housekeeper in the house, who had begun to show discreet affection for the new mistress. "You could use one of the storage rooms as a studio if you wish," Mrs. Davis suggested one day, noticing Laura contemplating the garden with a melancholic gaze. "It has good natural light." The idea brought a sparkle to Laura's eyes. Painting had always been her escape, an inheritance from her father that she carried with pride. With Mrs. Davis's discreet help, she transformed a small storage room at the back of the house into a simple but functional space to resume her art. It was during an afternoon of painting that Raphael found her by chance. He had returned early from work and, passing through the garden, noticed the storage room door ajar. What he saw left him speechless. Laura, absorbed, passionately painted a canvas depicting the city view from the mansion. It wasn't just technically perfect. There was soul in that work. "You have talent," he said, after observing her in silence for a few minutes. Laura startled. "Thank you. It's a family tradition." "Your father is Anthony Miller, the expressionist, the one who depicted London's deprived inner-city districts in the 90s. Laura's astonishment was genuine. "You know his work?" "I own two of his works. One of them, in fact, was the first piece of art I acquired with my own money." Raphael seemed slightly embarrassed by the revelation. "I didn't know he was your father until I researched you before the wedding." Something changed at that moment. A different silence, less hostile, settled between them. Laura saw, for the first time, a crack in Raphael's impenetrable armor, and he, in turn, glimpsed in his wife something beyond appearance, talent, passion, authenticity. That night during dinner, which for the first time they shared at the main table, and, not in separate rooms, they talked about art. Raphael revealed himself to be a surprising connoisseur, discussing movements and artists with expertise. Laura, in turn, shared stories of her childhood in her father's studios, amidst canvases and brushes. "Why did you give up painting?" he asked, genuinely interested. "I didn't give up. I just put it on hold when my father got sick. The treatment took all our time and resources." She hesitated. "I appreciate what you're doing for him, Raphael. Truly." He looked away, uncomfortable with the sincere gratitude. "It's an agreement. I'm just fulfilling my part." But both knew that something had changed. A small bridge had begun to form over the chasm that separated them. The following week, Laura returned from a visit to her father and found a surprise. The old storage room had been completely renovated. It was now a professional studio, with perfect lighting, top-of-the-line easels, and all the materials an artist could dream of. On a small table, an envelope contained a simple card. "So your talent doesn't stay on hold. RK." The gesture touched her deeply. It wasn't just a gift. It was a recognition of who she really was, beyond the role of a wife of convenience. That night, she knocked on Raphael's bedroom door, and when he opened it, hugged him in silence. It was a brief, awkward, but genuine contact. He was initially rigid, but he didn't push her away. "Thank you," she simply said before returning to her room. The dynamic between them began to subtly change. At social events, they no longer needed to force smiles. At home, they shared more meals, occasional conversations, comfortable moments of silence. Raphael started coming home earlier from work sometimes, and Laura noticed his discreet gaze following her as she painted. A month after the wedding, during a charity gala, Laura met Vanessa Harrington, Raphael's ex-fiancée and a prominent figure in London high society. Beautiful, sophisticated and venomous, Vanessa approached the couple with a calculated smile. "Raphael, darling, what a pleasant surprise. And this must be the new Mrs. Kingston. I heard she's the daughter of an artist?" The condescending tone made Laura straighten her posture. "Yes, Anthony Miller. Perhaps you're familiar with his work." "Oh, art isn't really my forte. I prefer more lucrative investments." Vanessa turned her attention back to Raphael. "Speaking of which, I hear the Kingston Group is expanding into the Asian market. I hope you have better luck than you did with that subsidiary in Europe. What a fiasco that was, wasn't it?" The blow was direct. Years earlier, a misguided decision by Raphael had almost led the company to bankruptcy, a period that coincided with the breakup of his engagement to Vanessa. "Every mistake teaches a valuable lesson," Laura replied before Raphael could speak. "My father always says that an artist only evolves through their errors. I imagine it's similar in business. The difference is that some learn and grow stronger, while others remain trapped in the past, pointing out others' flaws to mask their own insecurities." Vanessa paled. Raphael, beside Laura, let out a discreet smile. "If you'll excuse us, Vanessa, I need to introduce my wife to some investors," he said, leading Laura by the arm. "She's not only talented, but also surprisingly astute in business." As they walked away, Laura felt Raphael's hand lightly squeeze hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "No one has ever defended me like that before." "It wasn't defense, it was justice," she replied simply. That night, as they returned home, something had definitively changed between them. Raphael accompanied Laura to her bedroom door, as he always did out of politeness, but instead of the usual formal good night, he delicately held her face and kissed her. It was a brief, almost shy kiss, completely different from the confident persona he displayed in the corporate world. "Forgive me," he said, pulling away, confused by his own impulse. "I shouldn't have—" Laura, equally surprised, felt her heart race. "There's nothing to forgive," she replied, before quickly entering her room. Lying in bed, unable to sleep, Laura reflected on the whirlwind of emotions that overwhelmed her. Had she begun to feel something for Raphael? Or was it just gratitude for what he had done for her father? And what about him? Was he sincere or just momentarily vulnerable? In her head, the phrase spoken at the altar echoed, "I will never touch you." And yet, he had. The wall was beginning to crumble, and this both frightened and attracted her in equal measure. Across the hall, Raphael faced his own demons. He had sworn never to get emotionally involved with a woman again. Vanessa's abandonment and betrayal had built a fortress around his heart. Laura represented a danger. Her authenticity, her discreet strength, her loyalty to her father, all of it attracted him in a way he couldn't control. The next morning, both acted as if nothing had happened. Raphael left early for the office. Laura went to visit her father at the hospital, where she received good news. The treatment was working and there was hope of remission. It was the first time in months that Anthony had genuinely smiled. "Is he taking good care of you?" her father asked, observing her carefully. Laura hesitated. "We're adjusting. It's complicated, Dad." True love always is. Daughter, even when it's born from the most improbable circumstances. It's not love, Dad, it's just an agreement. Then why do your eyes sparkle when you talk about him? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Laura changed the subject, but her father's words echoed in her mind all day. In the afternoon, while painting in the studio, she received an unexpected call. Raphael had been in a car accident. Nothing serious, but he needed someone to pick him up from the hospital. The news hit her with surprising force, a visceral fear that didn't match the pragmatic relationship they maintained. At the hospital, she found Raphael sitting in a wheelchair, with a cut on his forehead and his right arm immobilized. Seeing her, his expression visibly softened. "You didn't have to come personally," he said, but his tone contradicted his words. "We're married, remember, in sickness and in health." Laura tried to sound casual, hiding the relief she felt. "What happened?" "A reckless driver. Nothing serious, just a broken arm and a few cuts." He hesitated. "How did you know I didn't ask them to call you?" "Your assistant called. Apparently you kept repeating my name while you were semi-conscious." Raphael looked away, embarrassed. It was the first time Laura had seen him vulnerable, without the mask of self-confidence he always displayed. Suddenly, he no longer seemed like the arrogant magnate, just an injured man, not just physically. On the way home, Raphael remained silent, visibly uncomfortable with his own fragility. Laura respected his space, driving the car carefully through London's busy streets. When they arrived at the mansion, she helped him out of the vehicle, offering discreet support. "I can manage on my own," he said, more out of pride than conviction. "I'm sure you can, but you don't have to," Laura replied with gentle firmness. That night marked another change. Out of practical necessity, Laura slept in Raphael's room, in an armchair beside the bed, in case he needed anything during the night. Between doses of painkillers, he spoke about things he had never mentioned. The pressure from his authoritarian father, the loneliness of a privileged but emotionally arid childhood, the constant fear of failure. "Why are you telling me all this?" Laura asked, intrigued by his sudden openness. "The painkillers, probably," he replied with a weak smile. "Or maybe because you're the only person who has looked at me beyond my bank account." The words hung in the air like an unexpected confession. Laura felt her heart race, aware that something fundamental was changing between them. What had begun as a cold agreement was slowly transforming into something neither of them had foreseen or sought, a genuine connection. But the road was still long. Fear, past scars, and erected walls would not disappear overnight. And as Raphael recovered, external forces were already moving, threatening the fragile rapprochement that was beginning to blossom between them. Forces that would test not only their loyalty, but also the true nature of the feeling that, against all expectations, was beginning to emerge. The weeks that followed the accident brought a new dynamic to the Kingston mansion. Laura began to personally care for Raphael during his recovery, even against his initial protests. The forced proximity broke down day after day, the barriers they had both built. As she changed the dressings on the cut on his forehead or helped him with company paperwork, conversations previously unthinkable flowed naturally. "I never imagined a man of your caliber would know so much about Russian literature," Laura commented as she organized the documents Raphael was reviewing from bed. "And I never imagined an expressionist's daughter would have such a talent for numbers," he retorted, observing the corrections she had made to some financial spreadsheets. "Where did you learn that?" "I managed my father's career for years. Art is expression, but it's also business." She shrugged. "When he got sick, I was the one who negotiated with galleries, managed sales, controlled finances, until the money ran out." Raphael looked at her with new respect. "You are much more than you appear, Laura Miller." "Kingston," she corrected with a small smile. "Laura." "To Kingston, remember, at least on paper." Something in her tone made Raphael shift uncomfortably in bed. "Do you regret it? Our agreement?" Laura hesitated, pondering her answer. "I don't regret what I did for my father, but sometimes I wonder if I didn't sell my soul in the process." "Your soul remains intact," he replied with a rare tenderness. "It's mine that was already for sale long before you appeared." The confession hung in the air, like a truth too painful to be explored. Both looked away, aware of the dangerous intimacy growing between them. At the end of that week, a professional nurse was hired to assist in Raphael's recovery, and Laura returned to sleeping in her own room. But something had changed. Now they dined together every night, sharing not only the meal, but also stories, ideas, even occasional laughter. Raphael began to visit the studio more frequently, sometimes just sitting silently to watch her paint. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that Eliza Kingston appeared without warning. Finding her son comfortably seated in the studio, watching his daughter-in-law paint, her face stiffened in disapproval. "I didn't realize we'd be having an art gallery at home," she commented coldly, looking around with disdain. "This seems more appropriate for a craft fair than for the Kingston mansion." Laura felt her body stiffen, but maintained her composure. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Kingston. Would you like some tea?" "I didn't come to socialize," the lady cut in, turning to her son. "I came to discuss the problem with the Chinese contract. Your accident has left everything in limbo, and investors are restless." Raphael stood up, his expression closed. "We can talk in the office. And leave your artist wife out of important matters." Eliza's tone was venomous. "After all, she seems to have gained quite a bit of space in your life lately. Who knows? Maybe she has some brilliant ideas about international business too." Before Raphael could respond, Laura intervened with surprising calm. "Actually, Mrs. Kingston, I think the expansion into the Chinese market would be more successful if we considered strategic local partnerships rather than trying to impose the British model. Their business culture values long-term relationships and adaptation to local traditions." The silence that followed was deafening. Eliza stared at her, astonished. Raphael, with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "And since when do you understand international business?" Eliza questioned, recovering. "Since I started reading the reports and projects your son brings home. I have a good eye for detail after all. I'm an artist." Laura smiled politely. "But you're right. These are important family matters. I'll leave you two to it." Laura gracefully exited, leaving mother and son alone. Hours later, when Raphael found her in the garden, his expression was serious. "You impressed my mother today," he said, sitting beside her on the stone bench. "She didn't admit it, of course, but I could tell. It wasn't my intention to cause trouble. On the contrary, your observation about the Chinese market was exactly what I'd been trying to explain to the board. How did you know?" Laura smiled. "You talk in your sleep, and you leave notes scattered around the room." She paused. "I'm sorry if I overstepped." Raphael was silent for a moment, contemplating the sunset that painted the London sky in orange hues. Then, in a surprising gesture, he took Laura's hand in his. "I have a proposal, not as your contract husband, but as a businessman. I would like you to accompany me to Shanghai next week as a cultural consultant for..." "Are the negotiations?" Laura's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious. You have a perception that my executives lack. And besides..." He hesitated, as if measuring his words. "I would like your company." The trip to Shanghai marked a new phase in Laura and Raphael's relationship. Away from London, From the critical eyes of the Kingston family and the weight of social expectations, they allowed themselves a closeness that would have been impossible at home. They shared not only business meetings, where Laura indeed proved her worth with astute cultural observations, but also moments of discovery, strolls through the ancient city, dinners in small local restaurants, long conversations on the hotel terraces. It was on the last night in Shanghai, after successfully signing the partnership contract, that Raphael finally allowed himself to completely drop his guard. On the hotel terrace, with the illuminated city at their feet, he told Laura the whole truth about his relationship with Vanessa, not just the financial betrayal, but the emotional manipulation he had suffered for years. "She made me believe that I was only worth something because of the money I possessed," he confessed, with bitterness in his voice. "And when she found someone with more, she simply discarded me. She took not only part of my fortune, but my ability to trust." Laura listened in silence, realizing that this confession represented a greater surrender than any physical contact could mean. When he finished, she simply held his hand without judgment or advice. "Thank you," he said after a long silence. "For what?" "For not saying you're sorry, for not looking at me with pity, for simply being here." That night, when Raphael accompanied her to her hotel room door, the kiss they exchanged was not hesitant like the first. It was a kiss of recognition, of mutual acceptance, of consciously crossed boundaries. When Laura invited him in, there were no more contracts or agreements between them, just two wounded human beings seeking comfort and connection in each other. The return to the United Kingdom brought reality back, with all its challenges. News of the successful negotiation with the Chinese spread quickly, and Laura's name began to circulate in business circles, not just as Raphael Kingston's wife, but as a strategic consultant with a unique vision. The attention sparked both admiration and envy. Vanessa Harrington, in particular, did not take kindly to the news of Laura's growing prestige. During a charity event at the Ritz, she approached the couple with her usual venom, but now directed specifically at Laura's new position in business. "Raphael, darling, I didn't realize you now delegated important decisions to your pet artist. It's an interesting strategy. Some call it nepotism, others business desperation." Before Laura could respond, Raphael intervened with calculated coldness. "I call it strategic intelligence, Vanessa, something you clearly wouldn't recognize even if it were right before your eyes." He firmly held Laura's hand. "My wife has more business acumen in her little finger than many directors with MBAs, and unlike certain people, her loyalty is not for sale." The blow hit Vanessa squarely. Her face flushed with anger, she walked away, not without casting a look that promised revenge. Laura realized at that moment that they had made a powerful and vengeful enemy. "She's going to try to hit us," Laura commented when they were alone. "I know that look." "Let her try," Raphael replied confidently. "There's nothing she can do to affect us now." But both underestimated the extent of Vanessa's resentment and her capacity for cruelty. 2 weeks later, a scandal erupted in the media. Sensational headlines announced alleged fraud in the Chinese contract, insinuating that Laura had used unorthodox methods to secure the deal. Manipulated photos showed her in compromising situations with Chinese executives, while falsified documents suggested bribery and corruption. The media storm was relentless. Reporters camped at the mansion's door. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Social media exploded with malicious comments. The Kingston Group suffered an abrupt drop in its shares, while investors demanded explanations. Amidst the chaos, Raphael became distant. He spent hours locked in his office, in crisis meetings with lawyers and executives. When he finally returned home, he was somber and silent. Laura tried to reach him to explain that it was all a setup, but he seemed increasingly isolated in his own emotional fortress. One night, after another exhausting day of crises, Raphael entered the studio where Laura was painting, an activity that had become her refuge amidst the storm. His gaze was hard, almost unrecognizable. "The lawyers think we should separate temporarily," he said, without preamble. "To contain the damage to the company's image." Laura felt as if she had been punched. And you? What do you think? I think I underestimated Vanessa's ability to destroy what matters to me. That doesn't answer my question, Raphael. Do you believe the accusations? Do you think I betrayed you? That I used dishonest methods? He looked away, and his silence was more painful than any verbal accusation. Laura let the brush fall, staining the immaculate floor with red paint, an exposed wound on the perfect white. After everything, you still don't trust me, she stated, her voice trembling with disappointment. Deep down, you're still that man at the altar who thinks I'm here for your money or power. It's not that simple, Laura. It's exactly that simple. Trust is non-negotiable. Either it exists or it doesn't. She took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. You know what the worst part is? I really thought we had something real, that our agreement had turned into something deeper. Raphael seemed torn, the conflict evident in his eyes. Part of him wanted to believe her, to trust what they had built. But the old fears, the old scars, spoke louder. The evidence is convincing. Evidence? Laura laughed, a bitter sound. Vanessa manipulated photos and documents. And you call that evidence? I gave you something much more valuable than any material proof, Raphael. I gave you my truth, my vulnerability. I let you see who I really am. The silence that followed was deafening. Laura realized they had reached an impasse, a defining moment that would determine not only the future of their relationship, but also who they truly were as people. I'm going back to my father's house, she finally decided, with a calm that didn't reflect the storm within her. Not because the lawyers think it's better for the company's image, but because I cannot stay under the same roof with someone who doesn't trust me. That same night, Laura packed her things. She didn't take expensive clothes or jewelry, only her painting supplies, some simple clothes, and the canvases she had painted in recent months. She left on the bed the corporate credit card she had never used, and the wedding ring that, for her, had ceased to be a symbol of farce to become a real promise. A promise now broken. When the driver stopped in front of the modest house in the London suburbs, where her father was, now recovering, Laura felt a mixture of relief and despair. She was back in her world to her roots, but she had left behind something she had never imagined finding, a true love, born from the ashes of a cold agreement. Anthony Miller, healthier thanks to the treatment financed by Raphael, received his daughter with open arms and understanding eyes. He didn't need detailed explanations to understand what had happened. Wounded pride is love's greatest enemy, he simply said, as he prepared tea in the simple kitchen. Both his and yours. It's not pride, Dad. It's trust. He preferred to believe lies rather than trust me. And you? You preferred to leave rather than fight for what you built. Her father's words hit Laura like a flash of clarity. There was a painful truth there. In her hurt, she too had chosen the safer path, to flee instead of staying and demanding to be heard. The following days were of readjustment and reflection. Laura returned to painting on the small back porch, expressing on canvas all the emotional turbulence that consumed her. Every brushstroke was an unspoken word, every color a repressed emotion. Without realizing it, she was creating her most powerful work yet, a series of canvases that told the story of a love born of convenience but transformed by choice. Meanwhile, the media scandal began to dissipate. Independent investigations raised doubts about the authenticity of the presented documents. Chinese executives publicly defended the integrity of the negotiations. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Raphael, however, remained silent. No calls, no messages, no contact. Laura oscillated between hope and resignation, between the desire for reconciliation and the certainty that some bridges, once broken, could not be rebuilt. It was Mrs. Davis, the housekeeper, who appeared at the Millers. Took her 2 weeks after the separation. Her gentle face showed genuine concern. "He's not well, Mrs. Laura," she said, without mincing words. "He doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, he works himself to exhaustion." "Did he send you here?" Laura asked, trying to ignore the tightening in her chest. "No, he doesn't even know I came, but someone had to do something." The lady hesitated. "I saw love blossom between you two. I saw two wounded people finding healing in each other. It would be a shame to let pride destroy that. It's not that simple, Mrs. Davis. True love never is, my dear. But it's the only one worth fighting for. After the housekeeper left, Laura remained thoughtful. The words echoed within her, mixing with her father's, creating a symphony of uncomfortable but necessary truths. That night, she made a decision. She wouldn't wait for Raphael to come to her. If their love was worth it, she needed to fight for it, not with wounded pride or demands, but with truth and vulnerability. She worked tirelessly in the following days, finalizing the series of paintings that told their story. Then, with the help of an old gallery owner friend, she organized a small exhibition at a gallery in central London. There were no grand announcements, just selective invitations for people in the art world and some cultural journalists. The exhibition's title was simple, yet powerful: Contract of Souls. Each canvas represented a moment of their journey: the marriage of convenience, the emotional wall, the first signs of change, the breaking of barriers in Shanghai, Vanessa's betrayal, the mistrust, the separation. The visual narrative was raw, honest, devastatingly intimate. On opening day, the gallery was modestly full. Critics praised the technical maturity and emotional depth of the works. Collectors made offers for the canvases. But Laura only waited for one person, who didn't appear. When the exhibition was about to close, she had already lost hope. Then, at the last moment, he walked in. Raphael Kingston looked different, thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes, his face marked by sleepless nights. He walked slowly through the gallery, observing each canvas with painful intensity, like someone reliving memories that were at once precious and torturous. Laura watched him from a distance, her heart pounding in her chest. When he reached the last canvas, simply titled Choice, he stopped. The work showed two silhouettes with their backs to each other, separated by an abyss, but connected by a thin, luminous thread. It was an unfinished painting, with blank spaces that suggested a future yet to be written. Raphael remained there, motionless, for long minutes. Then, in a gesture Laura would never expect from the powerful, always controlled businessman, he fell to his knees before the canvas and cried. They weren't contained, polite tears, but deep sobs that seemed to come from a place long sealed within him. Without thinking twice, Laura crossed the gallery and knelt beside him. She said nothing, just placed her hand on his shoulder, offering presence, not judgment. "I was wrong," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "I let fear blind me. I let the past dictate my future." "I made mistakes too," Laura replied. "I should have stayed and fought, not left." Raphael looked up, his eyes red from crying, but for the first time completely free of barriers or masks. "We found out the truth about the accusations. It was Vanessa, as you said. She confessed everything when confronted with evidence of forgery. Does that matter now?" "No." He held her hands tightly. "What matters is that, even when all the evidence pointed against you, my heart knew the truth. I just didn't have the courage to listen to it. I lost you out of cowardice, not out of distrust." People around them began to notice the drama unfolding, but the couple seemed oblivious to everything and everyone. At that moment, only the raw truth existed between them, the pain, the regret, but also the possibility of rebuilding. "What do we do now?" Laura asked, feeling more vulnerable than ever. Raphael looked at the unfinished canvas with its blank spaces, waiting to be filled. "We finish the painting together, if you still want to." The question hung in the air, laden with meaning. It wasn't just about giving the relationship a second chance, but about consciously choosing each other, not out of convenience or agreement, but out of love. Laura looked into the eyes of the man who had entered her life as a cold contractor and had transformed into her other half. She saw there not the arrogant magnate from the altar, but the complex, imperfect, and deeply loyal human being she had learned to love. "I do," she simply replied, "but this time without contracts, only promises we intend to keep." Raphael stood up, pulling her with him, and before everyone present in the gallery, he kissed her. It was not the calculated kiss of a couple keeping up appearances, nor the hesitant kiss of someone testing unknown waters. It was the kiss of two souls who, having known the taste of separation, consciously chose union with all the risks, challenges, and beauties it brought. The exhibition closed late that night. When everyone had left, Laura and Raphael remained, contemplating the unfinished canvas that symbolized their future. She picked up a brush and offered it to him. "Do you want to make the first brushstroke on our new beginning?" Raphael smiled, a genuine smile, free from constraints, like never before. "Only if it's together with you." And so, with their hands intertwined over the brush, they made the first stroke on the blank space of the canvas, a silent promise that, this time, they would write their story together, not out of obligation, but out of choice. The newspapers dedicated weeks to what they called the most unlikely romance of London high society, the story of Laura and Raphael, from the arranged marriage to the dramatic separation, from the revealing exhibition to the public reconciliation, became the subject of social columns, television shows, and even a documentary proposal. What had begun as a scandal transformed into a narrative of redemption that captured the public's imagination. But for the couple, the real journey was just beginning. The reconciliation in the gallery had been genuine, moving, cathartic, but also the first step of a much longer and more complex path. Returning to live together after the breakup required more than grand gestures. It demanded patience, constant vulnerability, and above all a daily commitment to honesty. They decided not to return immediately to the Kingston mansion. They needed a neutral space, free from the memories, both painful and sweet, that permeated those walls. They rented a beachfront apartment in Chelsea, luxurious but cozy, with a spectacular view of the ocean, and most importantly, a spacious art studio for Laura. "It's like we're getting to know each other again," she commented as they unpacked boxes in their new home, without external pressures this time. Raphael nodded, contemplative. "Actually, we're getting to know versions of ourselves we didn't even know existed." There was truth in that observation. The Raphael who now helped assemble bookshelves and decided on decor was far from the ruthless executive who had proposed a marriage of convenience. And Laura, who now discussed business strategies with the same passion with which she spoke of art, was no longer just the selfless daughter willing to sacrifice herself for her father. Anthony Miller, now in complete remission thanks to the treatment financed by Raphael, became a frequent presence in the couple's new home. His relationship with his son-in-law, previously marked by formality, blossomed into a genuine friendship. Raphael discovered in his father-in-law not only artistic brilliance but a life wisdom that his own father, obsessed with the financial empire, had never offered him. "I knew it would be like this," Anthony commented one afternoon as he watched Raphael and Laura working side by side. She on a new canvas, he on company documents. "I saw it the moment you exchanged rings, even without realizing it." "How could you know?" Raphael questioned, intrigued. "At that time, we barely looked at each other." The old artist smiled. "Eyes can lie, my son. Souls cannot. There was something between you from the beginning, a silent recognition, like two pieces of a puzzle that didn't yet know they were made for each other." His father-in-law's words stayed with Raphael for days, echoing in his mind as he re-examined every moment of the journey that had brought him there. From their first meeting in the law office, where the agreement was proposed, to the night in the gallery, where his defenses finally completely crumbled. The couple's professional life also transformed. After the scandal and subsequent public rehabilitation, the Kingston Group emerged stronger than ever. The partnership with the Chinese prospered, and Raphael finally assumed the international presidency, not as a man with a facade family, but as someone genuinely committed to values beyond profit. Laura, in turn, gained increasing recognition in the art world. The Contract of Souls exhibition traveled to Manchester, Edinburgh, and Bath, always with enthusiastic reviews. Collectors vied for her works, and an important contemporary art gallery in New York City showed interest in representing her internationally. "They want me to spend 3 months there, supervising the exhibition setup and participating in events," she told Raphael after receiving the formal proposal. There was a time when such news would have sparked insecurity and fear of abandonment in him. But the man who now held his wife's hands with genuine pride was no longer a hostage to his past traumas. "It's an incredible opportunity," he replied sincerely. "Your talent deserves global recognition." "Will you come with me?" she asked, studying his reaction. "For as long as I can. I have commitments here, but I can work remotely for a few weeks." He smiled. "Besides, I think we've already proven that physical distance is no match for what we've built." The tranquility with which they discussed future plans without fear of separation or betrayal was perhaps the greatest testimony to how they had grown together. The trust between them was no longer a matter of proof or guarantees, but a conscious choice, renewed every day. On the eve of the trip to New York, Raphael surprised Laura with a special dinner on the apartment's rooftop. Candles, flowers, the city of London illuminated at their feet, a breathtaking setting. "It feels like we're having our first date," Laura joked as she savored the carefully chosen wine. "In a way we are." Raphael seemed slightly nervous, something rare for the always confident businessman. "I wanted to do something special before your trip, something that marked not only what we've overcome, but what we've chosen to build together." At the end of the meal, he took a small velvet box from his pocket, not blue as would be traditional, but red. Inside there wasn't a conventional ring, but a unique piece, a delicate gold ring with small stones forming a color palette, like miniature paints. "It's not a new wedding band," he explained with suppressed emotion in his voice. "It's a symbol of our true commitment, not the one we signed on paper, but the one we write daily with our choices." Laura felt tears in her eyes as Raphael placed the ring on her finger, beside the wedding band she had started wearing again after their reconciliation. "It's perfect," she whispered. "How can something so beautiful be born from such a cold beginning?" "Perhaps because it was never truly cold," Raphael reflected, recalling his father-in-law's words. "Perhaps there was always a flame there, waiting for the right moment to turn into a blaze." The kiss they exchanged under the stars of the London sky sealed not only that moment, but the promise of a future built on foundations much more solid than contracts or conveniences. The season in New York was a resounding success. Laura's exhibition attracted critics, collectors, and art enthusiasts from around the world. Her personal story, the daughter of a British artist who married by agreement and found both love and her artistic voice in the process, fascinated the American public as much as her works. Raphael divided his time between the UK and the United States during those months. When he was in New York, he accompanied Laura to events, proudly observing her carve out her space in the competitive world of international art. When he needed to return to the UK for business matters, they stayed connected by daily video calls and constant messages, not out of insecurity, but out of a genuine desire to share their lives even at a distance. It was during one of these stays in New York that Raphael met Jessica Winters, an influential gallery owner who expressed interest in opening a branch in London, focusing on emerging Latin American artists. "Laura would be perfect to direct the space," Jessica commented, during a business dinner. "She has the artistic eye and also understands the commercial aspect, a rare combination." The idea quickly gained momentum. For Laura, it represented the opportunity to build a bridge between talented British artists and the international market, something she had always desired. For Raphael, it was a chance to support his wife's career without stifling her independence. Upon their return to the UK 3 months later, the gallery project was already underway. Raphael acquired an old historic mansion in the Notting Hill district, with panoramic views of the London skyline. The place underwent careful restoration, preserving its original architecture while incorporating modern elements necessary for an international standard exhibition space. "It will be more than a gallery," Laura explained as she supervised the works. "We'll have artist residencies, workshops for underprivileged communities, educational programs." Her vision went beyond the commercial. She wanted to create a true cultural hub that democratized access to art and offered opportunities for talents who, like her father, at the beginning of his career, were often ignored by the traditional market. The inauguration of the Contrast Gallery, a name chosen as a tribute to the couple's journey, was the most talked about cultural event of the year. It brought together celebrities and entrepreneurs, as well as artists from peripheral communities, creating an environment where seemingly opposing worlds met through art. In the center of the main hall, specially highlighted, was the canvas Choice, now finished. The space that was once blank had been filled with an explosion of colors and forms representing the path the couple had traveled after their reconciliation. Moments of discovery, growth, some challenges, but above all, deep connection. "It's the first time I've seen the complete version," Raphael commented, moved as he contemplated the work, beside his wife. "It's breathtaking. It's not really complete yet," Laura replied with a mysterious smile. "Some stories continue to be written eternally." There was a special sparkle in her eyes when she said that, a secret she had carried for a few weeks and had chosen to reveal on that special night. Leading her husband to a quieter corner of the gallery, away from guests and photographers, Laura placed his hand on her still flat belly. "Our story has just gained a new chapter," she whispered. The impact of the revelation swept through Raphael like an electric wave. For an instant he was paralyzed, processing the information. Then, in an impulsive movement that surprised even their closest guests, he lifted Laura into his arms and spun her around, laughing and crying simultaneously. "A child," he repeated, as if testing the word, savoring its meaning. "Our child." "Or daughter," Laura corrected, smiling through her own tears. "It's still too early to tell." "It doesn't matter. It will be perfect either way." Raphael gently placed her on the ground, suddenly concerned. "Should I be carrying you like that? Won't it harm the baby?" Laura laughed at her husband's sudden transition to protective mode. "I'm pregnant, not made of crystal, but it's adorable to see you already taking on the role of an overprotective father." News of the pregnancy soon spread among their closest guests, adding an extra layer of celebration to the already memorable night. Anthony Miller, now fully recovered and with renewed energy, couldn't hold back tears when he learned he would be a grandfather. "A child is the greatest work of art anyone can create," he said, hugging the couple, "and you will be brilliant artists on this journey." Even Eliza Kingston, who had gradually softened her stance towards her daughter-in-law, especially after Laura's international success, showed genuine emotion at the news. The prospect of a grandchild seemed to melt the matriarch's last reservations. "My son has finally found what truly matters," she commented, in a rare moment of vulnerability. "Something that all the money in the world cannot buy." The months of pregnancy brought a new dimension to Laura and Raphael's relationship. Together, they prepared the baby's room, attended first-time parent classes, discussed names and dreamed of the future. For Raphael, it was a particularly transformative journey. The man who had once declared, "I will never touch you," now spent hours talking to his wife's belly, telling stories to the unborn baby. Laura continued working at the gallery until the 8th month, when she finally yielded to her husband's and the medical team's pleas to slow down. Even then, she transformed part of her free time into a new artistic project, a series of paintings inspired by the experience of motherhood, capturing not only the physical changes, but also the emotional and spiritual revolution happening within her. "It's as if my perception of the world is being reconfigured," she explained to Raphael as she worked on one of the canvases. "Colors seem more vibrant, emotions more intense. It's frightening and wonderful at the same time." "Like our marriage," he observed with a smile. "It started frightening and transformed into something wonderful." The arrival of Sophia Miller Kingston was announced on a summer dawn when a fierce summer storm lashed London. The labor wasn't easy, 18 hours of labor that tested Laura's limits and Raphael's sanity, as he alternated between supporting his wife with words of encouragement and almost fainting from anxiety. When they finally held their daughter in their arms, small, pink, with dark down covering her head, something deep and irreversible changed within them. It was not just the arrival of a new being, but the birth of a new version of themselves. "She has your eyes," Raphael whispered, marveling, delicately touching the tiny hand that gripped his finger with surprising strength. "And your stubborn chin," Laura replied, exhausted but radiant. I hope she has your talent and sensitivity, and your determination and loyalty. Sophia grew up in an environment full of love, art, and possibilities. Laura's studio now had a small children's area where the girl could explore colors and textures under her mother's watchful eye. Raphael, who had completely reorganized his professional schedule to be present in his daughter's life, often took the little one on special meetings, strolls in the botanical gardens, visits to museums, afternoons at the beach. I never imagined it would come to this, he confessed to Laura, as they watched Sophia, now 2 years old, asleep between them after a bedtime story session. To what point? To be completely vulnerable to another human being. Two, actually. He caressed his wife's hair. If someone had told me that day at the altar that it would end like this, you would have run away, Laura completed, laughing softly. Probably. And it would have been the biggest mistake of my life. On their second wedding anniversary, counting from the reconciliation, not the original ceremony, they decided to renew their vows. Not in a formal church or luxurious hall, but in the garden of Anthony Miller's house, where it had all truly begun. The ceremony was intimate, only with family and close friends. Sophia, in her little white dress and a crown of flowers in her dark hair, carried the rings, the same ones, from the first ceremony, now laden with real meaning. When it was time for the vows, there were no rehearsed words or generic promises. Each spoke from the heart, unafraid to expose scars, fears, and hopes. I promise you imperfection, Raphael said, his voice choked. I promise to make mistakes, to have difficult days, to occasionally be too stubborn. But I also promise to always come back to you, to always choose our love above my ego, to always see who you truly are, not just the businessman's wife or the mother of my daughter, but Laura, the extraordinary woman who transformed my life when I least expected it. I promise you truth, Laura replied, tears streaming freely. Not just in the good times, but especially in the difficult ones. I promise to remember that our love is not perfect. It is real, with all the complications and beauties that implies. I promise to paint our story every day, with vibrant colors in moments of joy and also with deep shadows in moments of pain, because they are equally important in the picture we are creating together. When Sophia, impatient with the adult's words, ran to hug her. Parents' legs in the middle of the ceremony. Everyone laughed. It was a perfect interruption, a living reminder of the love they had built from the improbable initial contract. The party that followed was simple and joyful, extending through the warm Sunday afternoon. As guests chatted and Sophia ran through the garden with other children, Laura and Raphael found a moment of quiet under an old oak tree. You know what's funny? Laura reflected, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. When we first got married, I felt like I was selling my soul. Now I know that, in fact, I was just beginning to discover it. And I thought I was just closing a convenient deal, Raphael added. Little did I know I was signing the most important contract of my life, one without termination clauses. Laura smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. Actually, there is a termination clause. Raphael raised an eyebrow, intrigued. It only ends when there's no more canvas to paint our story, she explained, looking at the horizon where the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And from what I see, we have an infinite canvas ahead. Raphael followed her gaze, contemplating the future that opened before them, not as a predetermined path, but as a work in constant creation, full of possibilities, challenges, and above all, the certainty of being together by choice, not by obligation. So it's a lifelong contract, he concluded, pulling her closer. More than that, Laura corrected, turning to kiss him. It's a contract of souls, and those never truly separate, even when the bodies eventually pass on. As Sophia ran back into her parents' arms, bringing a freshly picked flower as a gift, they knew, with a certainty that transcended words, that what they had built from the ashes of a cold agreement was in fact eternal, not by grand declarations or romantic vows, but by thousands of small daily choices to see, hear, and love each other in their deepest truth. And so, amidst children's laughter and shared memories, another chapter concluded in the story that began as an imposition and blossomed as a choice, an imperfect, sometimes painful, but authentically theirs journey. A story that, like every great work of art, would continue to reveal new layers and meanings with the passage of time, growing in depth and beauty with each brushstroke of life.